thing you need to do extra, where is it you should be revising from. Those of you who are not taking Snap at all, who have not applied for Snap, as to what you should be doing in these 10 days or so. And those of you who are taking Snap, what should you be doing after the moment Snap is over. Okay? So that's the basic agenda of this session. And as I said, we'll start in about 5 minutes or so. Okay, so I'll log off I'll switch off in terms of my speech for a little while I do this, while I set up the PPT, and then we'll start most probably by 3:05. Okay, GPA will be starting just in a couple of minutes. Just give me a second to get everything back in order. Okay, welcome to XAT orientation PPT. The idea about this session is essentially to acquaint you with the pattern of the paper. Okay, help you identify as to what you should be doing in the next 30 odd days, or to how to prepare for this paper. Okay, and what are the peculiarities or the intricacies of the paper. Okay, so that you are better prepared to handle them. And finally, I'm sure something which all of you would always be keen on, which is what are the cutoffs, what is a good score in this paper, and for some for in cutoffs in that section wise. Okay, and Shubham. Okay, there seems to be some problem to a couple of people. Let me just check out. Okay. Okay. Uh, just confirm those of you can hear me clearly. Yeah, yes, okay, great. Audible. Okay, Madrasa, great. Sangeeta, great. Thank you very much. It's fine. So those couple of you who are having problems in terms of audibility or are not able to hear clearly, please check up your mic or your system. Maybe there's some issue there. So coming back to it, we are looking at that at the various section cutoffs and purely from the point of view of XLRI, the two programs, business management as well as PMIR. And obviously the cutoffs for XAT Bhubaneswar and Goa Institute of Management, the other two main institutes, through the papers act. Okay. So let's go on to this session. Now over the years you'll find that if I have to compare not only the last 3 years, but if I have to go back further 10 years or so, if I late 90s and early 2000s, that was a vocabulary based paper. And in terms of mathematics or in terms of quantitative aptitude, it used to be more of a reasoning-based paper. Over the years, it has changed form, and while the sections have remained by and large the same, whether we call them verbal ability, logical reasoning, analytical reasoning, decision making, quantitative ability, data interpretation, the kind of questions which are asked has changed. So from a vocabulary and based paper in verbal, it has shifted to becoming a reasoning based paper. Okay. And incidentally, from a reasoning based quantitative, so this is the English part. And from in quantitative, which was essentially reasoning, had lots of puzzles and also questions of permutation, combination, probability, base system, etc. It has become more of a CAT type QA. CAT QA kind of a paper. So over the years, it has evolved shape and it has changed from what it was earlier. And from your point of view, what you need to remember is, while the sections are similar, this paper, with the exception of maybe the section called decision making, it is by and large similar to what we have done for CAT. Okay. So it is that 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have said that and CAT are very, very different papers. Today, I would say if I just ignore this section called decision making, then CAT is very, very similar to that. They are equivalent, they are similar, very similar. They are not very, very different from each other. Okay. In terms of number of questions, you'll find that all three sections are quantitative, about 25 last year, 28 in reasoning and decision making, 32 in verbal ability, logical reasoning, and you'll find by and large this kind of a pattern has been there, when about a third of the paper is in each of these sections. When I say third, in terms of the number of marks. Okay. Interestingly, 2011 is an important landmark for this paper, because 2011 XAT did an experiment which boomeranged, which was a disaster. In that experiment, every section had questions which had marks ranging from 1 to 5. So there were 1 mark questions, 2 mark questions, 3 mark questions, 4 mark questions, and 5 mark questions. So quantitative ability had total 117 marks, 43 questions for 117 marks, 24 questions for 67 marks in analytical reasoning, decision making, and verbal ability, logical reasoning, 34 questions, 69 marks. So when I said there's a disaster, it was a disaster because this section QADI was most of the students were not able to handle it at all. Not only were the questions difficult, but also they were lengthy, and then we had questions which had marks ranging from 1 to 5, and so this became a very complicated paper, and many people were unable to handle this, and the cutoffs in this year became a very lopsided affair with high cutoffs for these two sections, verbal ability and analytical reasoning, and very low cutoff for quantitative ability. So which is why I say it's a disaster, because a well-balanced paper is a good paper. A paper which is biased towards any one of the 3 sections is a disastrous paper. Okay? So this, while we have put it here, you need to remember this was an experiment which was done. Unlikely it will be repeated, but the good part of 2011 paper will continued in 2012 also. So 2012 you have 85 questions with 100 marks. There are questions which have 1 mark, 1 mark questions, and there are questions which have 1.5 marks. Okay. And that is true for all the 3 sections. 32 questions, 35 marks. 28 questions, 30 marks. So there were 4 1.5 marks questions out in this section. Similarly, 25 questions, 35 marks. So total is 85 questions, 100 marks. So that was a good part. So some amount of differential marking is a good thing, because it introduces some amount of, let me say, unpredictability in the paper, and also it ensures that higher effort gets higher marks. Unlike the earlier papers, unlike what we have in CAT, when higher effort does not get higher marks at all. So but from your point of view, I want you to remember, CAT is very similar to XAT now, or XAT is very similar to CAT now, and there is a differential marking which was introduced in 2011, and most probably that will continue going forward also. Okay. Let us quickly go through each of the sections, each of the 3 sections first. Okay. If we look at these 3 sections, the number of questions in the last 3 years in the verbal ability have been roughly about 30, 35, 31, 32, 34. So about 30, 35 mark questions have been asked, and in the section in the last 3 years. But where have these questions come from? You'll find one obvious place is reading comprehension. So reading comprehension comprises about 8 to 10 questions. So you can say roughly about 10 out of 30 or 35 questions, or 1/3 of the paper is from reading comprehension. Okay, this is the part. Okay. This is reading comprehension. Typically, the papers have 1 to 2 passages for the last 2 years. Before that, there could be higher passages, but when there were 5 passages in 2010, the length of the passage was shorter. Here, the length of the passage was slightly longer as compared to the earlier. So these 2 papers, the length of the passage you could say should be slightly higher as compared to 2010. But by and large, whichever way you look at it, about 1/3 of the paper, or 10 out of 30 odd questions, is from reading comprehension. Okay. And so this is the area of reading comprehension. Next, we come to vocabulary. Okay. Vocabulary is asked in terms of antonym, synonym, appropriate, inappropriate usage, vocabulary, analogies, fill in the blanks, word usage, okay, and so on and so forth. This again will typically constitute about 7 to 10 questions. Okay. So you can say about 60% of the paper roughly comprises of these 2 areas, and then you will say about half the paper in the last 2 years is critical reasoning. Okay. About let's say 15 to 17 questions. 15 in 2010, 17 here, 9 here, So by and large, you can say if you look at last 2 years or in general, the 3 major components of this paper in the area of English are reading comprehension, about 1/3 of the paper, vocabulary, which is in whichever form you want to look at, including analogies, synonyms, antonyms, fill in the blanks, etc., about 1/4 of the paper, and the balance, typically half the paper, let's say 1/3 to half the paper, is nothing but critical reasoning. And from your preparation point of view, you need to remember that critical reasoning is the most important area out here. RT, you will not find it to be difficult. Vocabulary will also not be difficult. Critical reasoning is what makes a difference as far as this section is concerned. So from your preparation point of view, please go back to your critical reasoning material in your study material which has been provided to you. Please go back to the past papers or the mock CATs or the mock XATs and make sure you are thorough with critical reasoning. It's critical reasoning which is the most important component of the verbal ability and logical reasoning area. Okay. So please make sure you are thorough with this particular area. Okay. Let's move on to the quantitative ability area. Okay. Again, as I said, that this paper has become very, very similar to CAT. When I say it has become very similar to CAT, you can see that number system plus arithmetic. Again, out of the 30 odd questions of this area, about 10 questions, 7 questions, 12 questions from this area only. Okay. Algebra. Okay. So these are 13 questions from arithmetic plus number system. Algebra, there are 3 questions out here, 4 here, 7 here, and then you have geometry. Okay. So when you're looking at this paper purely from a preparation perspective, you really don't have to do too much change in terms of preparation vis-a-vis what you did for CAT. Okay. Again, I am highlighting that because 10 years ago, I would have said you should go all out for permutation, combination, algebra, function. Okay. That is not the case now. That is not the case now. In the last 5-6 years, slowly it has become closer to CAT in terms of quantitative aptitude, ability, and that is what you need to remember. Okay. And if you look at the areas, 1 question of PNC, 0 from PNC last year, 1 before that, 6 out of 40 in the previous year. So while there's there, it is much lesser in number. Okay. And data interpretation. Okay. And data interpretation is not difficult in this simple question. Data is not complicated. So if you just look at this paper, I will say arithmetic, number system plus arithmetic. This will be about let me put about 60% of the paper will come from here. Number system plus arithmetic, and in that I'm including data interpretation also, because data interpretation is nothing but percentage change, etc., averages and so on and so forth. So about 60% of the paper will be from these areas: number system plus arithmetic, and you add data interpretation also to it. Okay. So between these 3 areas, or number system, arithmetic, data interpretation, the most important area, then the rest of the paper, I will say geometry mensuration. Okay. This will be about 20 to 25% of the paper, and the balance 20% will be rest of the topic. Okay. Which will obviously include some bit of algebra and a couple of questions of permutation, combination, maxima, minima, reasoning, puzzles, linear puzzles, etc., and so on and so forth. So from a preparation point of view, your focus again goes back to these 3 areas only. Also, I'll say you first need to make sure you're thorough with this area of number system and arithmetic, which is about 2/3 of the paper almost, geometry plus mensuration, and then you need to worry about anything else. Okay? These are the 2 broad areas we need to focus on. Make sure you are thorough in these 2 areas. Fortunately, for those of you who are not taking SNAP, you have about a month in front of you, and you can definitely do well in this paper if you are able to do well in geometry mensuration and number system arithmetic. Okay. 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 Coming to the 3rd area, analytical reasoning and decision making. Analytical reasoning has been actually the strength of data of that. Unfortunately or fortunately for many of you, last year there were not too many questions of analytical reasoning. It was primarily a decision-making paper. Now, decision making, I'm sure not many of you are aware of, so I'll just take a couple of minutes and explain it. In decision making, a business situation is given to you. A business situation, or at times even a personal situation, okay, in which there's a dilemma and you are supposed to take a decision. So a situation is given and you are based on the data given, a question will be asked and you are supposed to take a decision. For example, it could relate to saying that there's a plant, there's a factory or there's a plant, okay, which has a history of, let's say, very harmonious worker management relationship, harmonious workers management relationship. A new person has come into the system and he decides to put in some changes, and when he introduces some changes, a situation arises. So what should be done now? So those are the kind of questions. And from your perspective, decision making is in a way a cross between reading comprehension and data interpretation without the calculation part. Okay? So you will find in reading comprehension or in decision making, you could have a short 5-line passage also, or you could have a long half-a-page passage. Okay? Obviously, if it's a long half-a-page passage, it will not have 1, but 2, 3, or 4 questions. If it's a short passage, it will only have 1 question. In this section, between the two, decision making is easier from my point of view. It is less chances of making a mistake because there are hardly any questions in terms of calculations or other things. But those of you who are not good in critical reasoning might suffer here also. So when I'm looking at what is that one area which is very, very important to clear this paper, I will say critical reasoning. Why? Because critical reasoning will be helpful to you in the first section of verbal ability, and it will be helpful to you in the area of decision making also. Okay. Arrangement, these individual AR questions or arrangement sets are not difficult at all. While last year in 2012 there were hardly any questions from here, if you go back to the previous papers, you will find about half the paper used to be analytical reasoning. AR used to be about half to 60%, and decision making used to be 40 to 50%. Okay? But last year, I would say, is an aberration, and at this point of time, I will not assume that analytical reasoning is not likely to come. Decision making is not similar as in IFT. We will be having these sessions separately, but my suggestion would be go back to the XAT papers. Those XAT papers are available to you in the SIS. If you go through them, you will be able to identify and understand them. We will be having a separate session on decision making in any case. Okay. Before we move to cutoffs, Abhishek, I will hand over the mic to you, and you could just add to whatever you want to do in each of these areas. I've gone back to the first slide. Over to you, Abhishek.
Okay, thanks a lot, GP. I think you pretty much covered almost all of it. I would just want to highlight what are the changes for this year's XAT, that is XAT 2013. As all of you must be aware about this, that XAT is now a 3-hour paper. Fine. So earlier it was a 2-hour, 20-minute paper, in the sense that all the XATs were 2 hours for the first part of it, and there was an essay writing task which was given 20 minutes. So it was earlier a 2-hour, 20-minute paper. Now it's a 180-minute paper, and that is excluding any breaks. Fine. So the first part now would be of 2 hours 20 minutes, and the second part would be of 40 minutes. So this first part is 2 hours 20 minutes, and just mind it that this is that same part which was earlier given 2 hours. So when we'll be talking about cutoffs and everything, just keep that in mind, that since you are getting extra 20 minutes for that same part 1, the cutoffs might go up a little. Fine. So we have checked with XLRI, they don't intend to make any changes to part 1 of the paper. So most probably you are going to have just those 3 sections. There might be a few changes here and there. For example, last year the section that is called AR and DM was nothing but only DM. So there was just one set of AR, that too very difficult. Not many people did it. And in fact, XLRI rightly wrote the name of the section as DM only in place of analytical reasoning and decision making on the scorecards of the candidates. Fine. So things like this might happen. Fine. But there's every chance that the paper would be very similar to last year's paper. So we'll have 3 sections. Just the time limit goes up. So in place of 2 hours, it becomes a 2 hour 20-minute paper. Incidentally, it's also exactly the time which is given for CAT. Fine. So both CAT and XAT, now that we are 140-minute papers. For the part 2 of the paper, we checked with them. What they're saying is that apart from the essay that they have been given to all the aspirants to write in those 20 minutes, there'll be a GK section in part 2. Now, I don't know if it's a good news for some of you, but this second part means the essay plus the GK section would not be evaluated for your percentile calculation. So it will not be used for percentile calculation. It will be passed over. The scores, the analysis, the evaluation of the second part would be handed over to the B schools that want to use this for their analysis and evaluation of the candidate. Fine. So your XAT scorecards most probably would not reflect the scores that you obtain in part 2 of the paper. GK section, we are still not sure if it's going to be subjective or objective or what, but there is a good chance since they said that there will be some 25-30 questions in the GK section. So I think there's a very good chance that this GK section will be objective only. But I don't think that they would ask you to mark the answers in the OMR sheet for this part. So probably they'll give you some space in the part 2 of the paper. They'll give you some space to write an essay, followed by 25-30 GK questions, which will be objective in nature, and for which you will probably have to mark the answer on the sheet itself. I'm not so sure about this, but just make sure that you read the instructions very carefully about all these things. And so all this depends. We have made sure that the pattern for the mock XAT that CL is coming out with that's going to be conducted in a few days time, it's exactly the same as what we have zeroed in on after talking to the authorities. Fine, but still keep that in mind that anything may happen on the exam day, and just read the instructions very carefully. So the important thing is part 2 is not going to be evaluated for the percentile calculations. Only by the B schools which shortlist you might use the part 2 scores. Part 1 would remain the same in all probability, just the time limit goes up for part 2. From 2 hours it becomes a 2-hour 20-minute paper. Apart from it, my advice to the students would be just keep yourself abreast with the latest happenings. Make sure that you go on the XAT website regularly, check the FAQs section, check any other notification anywhere. Just make sure that you read any interview or anything. We'll obviously keep you updated, but you should also keep yourself updated regarding the happenings on this. But this is what we have right now for you regarding the XAT 2013 updates. I would go back again to the GP. Can you move to the first slide? I think it's worth mentioning that if you look at this 2011 paper, the weight given to the quantitative ability and data interpretation section was almost 50% of the paper. So 117 marks out of 253. So I find this quite an aberration. If you look at all the previous year XAT patterns, like it's almost 1/3 generally, a bit more than that, a bit less than that, but never that heavy. So I think that was an aberration, and I don't see it happening now on. So it was probably an experiment that flopped for XAT authorities. So the weights, the respective weights of these sections are probably going to be 1/3 only. Decision-making section, AR and DM section, has gradually been moving the DM way. So you looked at 2010 analytical reasoning had more questions and decision-making. Then the next year there was an decision-making questions was slightly more than AR questions, and in the last XAT, as you can see in the slide, in the last XAT there were hardly any AR questions. There was this one set which is very difficult. So don't be surprised if this time it's only decision making in this paper. Be prepared for it. There's nothing that you can do about it. The good news is that the cutoffs in the section is generally very low. The percentile cutoffs are very low, and in terms of scores it's extremely low. For example, this was a 30 mark section last year, and the cutoff was just 6.25 marks to be precise in this section. So which was, I think, manageable, pretty manageable. We'll go back to the first slide once more. Okay, somebody is asking about how to register for mock XAT. Hershey, just go to any of the CL centers. They'll tell you the procedure to register for the mock XAT. Okay, apart from this, if you look at this slide, differential marking by XAT, differential marking was introduced by XAT in 2011. 2011 had 5 different types of marks. So it had 1 markers, 2 markers, 3, 4, and 5 markers. 2012, they persisted with differential marking, but it was the extent of differential marking was reduced, and it was I'd say that sanity prevailed in 2012. So that way there were 1 markers, 1.5 markers, and 2 markers. So as you can obviously understand that 1 marker questions in 2011 paper were not of 20% difficulty level as compared to the 5-marker question. So that in a way proved to be a bit of a lottery in 2011. 2012, I think it was a fair system wherein they persisted with the differential marking, but it was fairly okay with the candidates that way. Another reason was that candidates were far better prepared to have a paper in which they'll have differential marking. Plus, there were not too many questions with differential marking. So that way, 85 questions, 100 marks, it was an okay kind of a paper. Another important thing is, in the last 2 years, XAT has, I'll not say that it has done away with the differential negative marking. It might be reintroduced, we never know. But until 2010, XAT used to have differential negative marking. By differential negative marking, what we mean is that if in a particular section, you get a number of questions incorrect beyond a particular figure, the extent of negative marking increases. For example, they'll give you something like this. For the first 4 incorrect questions in a section, 0.25 marks per question will be deducted. And after the first 4 incorrect questions, 0.33 marks per question will be deducted. So this is called differential negative marking, or I'll better call it progressive negative marking. So more the number of questions that you get incorrect, more the harm that is done to you that way. So that is basically to discourage the students from making random guesses. So it was a peculiar feature of XAT papers, but it's not so for the last 2 years. But be prepared for it. It might be reintroduced this year. They might do away with the differential marking and reintroduce progressive marking, or in fact even both can be done simultaneously. So be prepared for all such permutations and combinations. Another important thing is that we talk to these people and they're saying that the number of questions in the paper in XAT 2013 is expected to be the same. So they are saying that it will be almost 85 questions also this time also. So don't expect a paper having 100 plus questions, as was the case with XAT until 2 years back. So it might be 85, it might be 90, 95, but I don't expect the number of questions to go beyond 100 in any case in XAT 2013 this year. So expect a paper on very similar lines this year as if you compare it to XAT 2012. So keep that in mind while doing all these papers. We'll hand it over to GP back again, and we'll come back when we talk about the cutoffs. We have in fact calculated the exact cutoffs of XAT last year.
Yeah, thank you, Abhishek. For the just to remind everyone, so what we are talking about this year is that the paper is likely to be very similar to what happened last year. So XAT 2012 should be the benchmark around which you should be preparing. XAT 2012 had a couple of things. We had differential marks per question. We had 1.5 marks question. Okay, so there was differential marking. Okay, and there was negative marking was there, but was not progressive negative. Okay, so negative marking is there, but not progressive. So you can look at standard negative marks of 1/3 or 1/4 or 1/5, whatever it is, right? The third thing is, we are saying because it is along the similar lines, it is likely to be 85 to 100 or 95 questions, not more than 100, likely to be somewhere in this region, because the pattern is similar and the amount of time available for part 1, which was last year 2 hours, has now become 2 hours and 20 minutes. So if you have a slightly higher amount of time, maybe when 20 minutes has been increased, maybe there might be an increase of questions by about 5 to 10 questions. So we are assuming that the paper is likely to be less than 100 questions or not more than 100 questions. So 85 to 100 is the range. Progressive negative marking unlikely to be there, and differential marking to continue. Okay. So that's a broad benchmark that we are looking at as far as this paper is concerned. Okay, let me now go further and look at the cutoffs. Okay. Sorry, yeah. Looking at the cutoffs.
Just a thing. I have, in fact, these are the approximate cutoffs. I've just done some calculation and found the exact one. So if you can make me the presenter, I'll put that slide in which I've zeroed in on the exact cutoffs to the second place of decimal. So I think they'll be a bit helpful.
Yeah, Abhishek, the rights have been passed to you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So while you are going through and uploading the PPT, uploading those additional slides, let me quickly run through the questions. GK, what should you focus on with respect to GK? Now, GK is again, when XAT has not given any idea what that GK is likely to be, then it is advantageous for you to just repeat whatever we have done for different papers. So from your point of view, you should be looking at, in terms of GK, the 3 IFT GK sessions, 2 ILMA sessions, and we'll be having a few GK sessions now, and go through all of them. Go through your management compass last 5 issues or last 6 issues, and Gyanhara last 4 to 6 months. That should be sufficient from a GK perspective. Likely to be 25-30 questions on the higher side. Likely to be 25 to 30 questions on the higher side, and hence should not be too much of a problem. The savings ratio, it is not being that the GK will not be evaluated initially. It will only come into picture in the second stage. That has always kept essay as a separate item. Okay, and GK also they are doing the same thing this year. So GK plus essay is a separate item. Till last year, the essay was evaluated only for those students who were able to make it to the second stage. So at the interview stage, that essay was evaluated or read, and the other essays were not used at all. Okay, so remember this part, GK is also in the same boat as essay, and hence it will come into picture only in the second stage, and that is when you need to worry. Okay. At this point of time, yes, I would say do whatever you did for IFT GK, just repeat that for that also. And what you are doing, if you are taking SNAP, that SNAP GK again will be helpful for you in terms of GK. So very quickly, in terms of GK, I am putting on a few things. One, we have done ILMA sessions. ILMA GK, we have done 2 sessions. For IFT, we have done 3 GK sessions. Then for SNAP, and for SNAP, we are doing 3 sessions. And after that, from IFT, from that perspective, we'll be in 2 more sessions. Okay. So these 10 sessions, you have to make sure you have to go through all of them and you have to make sure you follow with them. Management compass. Okay, I would say last 6 issues. When I'm saying last 6 issues, let's say from July to November. July to November or July to December also, if you want, you can do July to December. Issues you have to do. Gyanhara. Again, something like July to November, July to December is what you have to look at doing. This should be good enough. Okay, and yes, Sanika, we'll be going back to the percentiles and we'll be discussing that in detail. But from a GK perspective, please do this much. I think it will be more than enough from your perspective. Okay. So let's go to the cutoffs now. Abhishek, since you have just worked all the numbers all over again, suggest that you take over from here in terms of this slide itself.
Okay, yeah, thanks, GP. So these are the actual numbers that are in front of you. These are the cutoff numbers for XLRI, the 2 programs of XLRI for the last 2 years. As you can see, for 2011, I haven't tried to arrive at the exact numbers in terms of marks. But for 2012, we have got the numbers in terms of marks as well as the percentile cutoffs. So in terms of percentile, it's the official data. So this is the data that was released by XLRI post the exam and the results and analysis. So these are the exact numbers. The numbers that you can see in the column called score are the numbers that have been arrived at by us after the analysis of the student's score and percentages and the percentile cutoffs. So they gave the scores in terms of percentages. So we converted in them the scores to the actual scores in terms of marks. And then we tried finding the exact percentile that was equal to the cutoff percentile, and that's how we have put these numbers. So these are fairly accurate. These numbers given for 2012 in terms of scores are fairly accurate. For 11, we did not do the exercise because that paper was also a slightly different kind of paper. So every analysis and everything went haywire in that paper. So I think this will give you a good idea of the paper. XAT cutoffs are generally never beyond 30% of the total marks of the paper. As you can see in the last year's paper, for PMIR, the number was 28 and for BM it was 29.25. These are the exact numbers. As you can see, the paper had a difficult decision-making section. So the cutoff was equally low that way. So I agree, I understand it was difficult, but to get a 6.25 out of 30 was not that difficult. Even in terms of percentiles, you can see the numbers are not too demanding. You cannot think of getting an IM call at a 88 overall percentile or a 90 overall percentile. So the sectionals are, I'll say, if you look at this 88 and 90, the overall percentile numbers, sectionals are stiff. But the overall percentile requirement of XAT is not too much. I think it's very, very achievable. XAT, the good news for you is, has increased the number of calls in the last 2 years. So last year, for PMIR, they called around 1,350 people for the second stage. 1,350 is a huge number for an institute of that XLRI status. And for VM, the number was around 950. So a lot of people get both the calls. Still, you can safely assume that around 2,000 people would be called by XLRI for the two programs. So 2,000 people called by XLRI, I think it's a good enough number, and everybody who is prepared well should back himself or herself up to get a call from XLRI. If you look at the sectional cutoffs, decision making out of 30 is 6.25, which is not even 25% in the paper. Verbal and logical reasoning, percentile cutoffs were 80 and 70 respectively for PMIR and business management, again around 11 to 12 marks. And the only difference between PMIR and business management, a huge difference is in the quantitative ability and data interpretation requirements. So traditionally, for the BM program, the percentile cutoffs is much higher than the percentile cutoff requirement for PMIR program. If you look at the other two, it's almost the same all the time. Even if you look at 2011 numbers, let's look at verbality, logical reasoning. So it's 70, 80, and 70. AR and DM is 80, 80, 80. All the 3 years, 75, 80, 80, 80. The only difference you can see is between QA and DI cutoff. So whereas for PMIR in 11 it was 70 and 90 respectively, here it was 70 and 92. So there is the difference. So somebody who is not so good at QA and DIR, in fact we have seen people missing out on the business management call because of a not so good percentile in QA and DI section. Apart from it remains almost the same. So they have already said that they are planning to call a huge number of candidates for the second stage this year. So we have reasons to believe that if the paper is on similar lines, probably the percentile cutoffs would not vary too much. So in a nutshell, you can say that if you are able to score around 1/3 of the total marks allotted to the section, you should back yourself up to get a call. Around 1/3 of the total marks. So as you can see, it's 11 and 12 out of 35 respectively in English, 6.25 in DM, and 6.5 and 11 respectively for PMIR and BM out of 35. So it has never crossed, it did not cross in all these 6 in last years that mark of 33%. So if you can get around 35-45%, 35 to 40% in the section, you should back yourself up to get a call. If you add these numbers up, if you add this up, for example, if you add the exact scores for PM and IR, 12.25, 6.25, and 6.5, this is 12 plus 6 plus 6, this is 25 marks. So 25 plus 3 is 28. So anybody who has cleared all the cutoffs would most probably get a call. And if you look at this BM, this is the margin is narrower. It is 11 plus 11, 22, plus 6, 28, 28.25, and the call is at 29.25. So just 1 mark more than that. So virtually everybody who cleared the 3 sectional cutoffs for BM got a call for the second stage. So that way, clearing the sectionals is very, very important. That last year, for your information, last year, though you can see that this ARDM cutoff is very low, I saw a lot of students getting marks in the range of 35-40, missing out on a call because of ARDM. So just make sure that you balance the sections out, and your scores are not too skewed that way. So it might ruin the overall picture for you. So that is it from my side on the cutoffs. If you want, you can take a note of these numbers. I think they're going to be important if somebody wants to analyze the last 2 years paper. I'll suggest not analyzing 2011 paper. That was an aberration. That's not going to happen again. 2012 would be very important. They've already said that the paper in 13 would be very similar to 12 paper. So analyze these numbers, look at the paper, and try to find out if achieving these numbers was really difficult. In hindsight, it actually looks easy at times, but it'll still give you a fair idea of what to expect in 2013. Over to you, GP.
Yeah, thanks, Abhishek. So just to summarize what Abhishek has said, I think what you need to remember is, let's that the cutoffs are just about 30% of the paper, of the total marks of the paper, and this trend is not new. Even if we go back, let's say 5 years or 7 years ago, and never was the cutoff more than 30, 32 or 33%. So 35% is a very safe number. what has definitely happened is in the last 2 years that XLRE has started giving larger number of calls to have a greater diversity in terms of the kind of students they are attracting. Otherwise, till about 3 to 4 years ago, XLRE was, the profile of students was very similar to that of IN, which means primarily engineers with working. And because they lowered the cutoff criteria, last 3 years they have been having a large number of students from other streams as well. Okay? So that was conscious decisions on the part of XLRE to have a diversity in terms of the student base. Okay? So let me now move on to the next area as to how should you, as to how much time to spend in each section, and how much time, and in which sequence to attend the paper. So if we just look at the benchmark of last year, let me just go back here. Yeah, 32, 28, 35, 25. Okay. So if you look at the three sections, VALR, verbal ability, logical reasoning, analytical reasoning, decision making, and quantitative aptitude, ability plus data interpretation. Okay. Now last year there were 85 questions. I am assuming that we still have the same 85 questions, which is 32, 28, and 25. So 32 questions adding up to for 32, 28, and 25 questions. So it makes it 85 questions. These were 35 marks. Okay. So 35 marks and 30 marks. Okay. So 100 marks. Okay. These are the questions. Okay. Now, with 2 hours 20 minutes or 140 minutes with you, the default assumption always is that each section is equally important, and since each section is equally important, you should spend equal amount of time in each of the three sections. So you will come to something like a 45 odd minutes per section. Okay. However, we need to remember that this section is not time consuming as much as the third section, the first two sections, because for the third section is likely to have calculations on account of both QA as well as DI. So my default assumption would be that you should give a little extra time to QA DI and maybe equal amount of time to the other two sections. So if you give 40 minutes out here, okay, and 15 minutes out here, 40, 40, 18, 50, 130, and maybe the balance 10 minutes you could decide at the later stage to put in either here or there. Okay, 10 minutes surplus. Okay. Okay. But I would strongly recommend that with 140 minutes, you should give 40 minutes to VLR, 40 minutes to decision making, and then 50 minutes here. If you want to cut down time from QADI because you're extremely strong in that area, perfectly fine. But do not try to rush through this area. ARDM is the area which, for the minimum amount of time, gives the maximum amount of marks. And when I'm looking at ARDM, I'm saying AR and DM between the two. To me, DM is the one which is a differentiator. This is a differentiator because here there are no calculations. Okay? And those of you who are not strong in quant but good in English or critical reasoning, so you can use your critical reasoning skills out here to get the marks also. But by and large, I will say decision making, most of you will not find it difficult at all. Okay? My recommendation would be look at the last 4-5 years papers. In each of those papers are decision making questions. You find these are very, very common sense kind of questions. The situations are not out of the world. They are regular daily life situations, either in the personal level or in terms of corporate world. But situations which you will be able to understand, you will be able to empathize with and take the right decision if you go by pure common sense. Okay? So decision making is the one, but decision making passages could be lengthy. So your reading speed is important out here, which is why I would not want you to cut down the time here also. Last couple of years, VALR, it is critical reasoning, which is the most important part, and critical reasoning typically will be a 5 to 7 line passage, which again means it could be time consuming. So please don't try to cut down time here also. So 40, 40, 50 is what I would recommend, with the extra 10 minutes available to you to be employed in whichever section you think you want to maximize your scores. In terms of attempts, I will say if you can attempt something like 50% in each one of the sections. 50% attempts in each section is great. And obviously, I'm saying you need a score of, and your target score should be 35%. Okay. So with if there's assuming the same kind of breakup, if you are attempting something like 15 to 16 questions in quant, which will add up to 20 marks, you have done a great job of this paper. Okay. And in 15 minutes, that should not be a problem. ARDM, again, I will say, make sure you attempt 15 to 17 questions so that you get a score of about 10 plus. And VALR, again, when you're looking at VALR, quickly go through the vocab portion. Okay. Vocab, as I said, was you will have analogies, you will have synonyms, antonyms. Synonyms, antonyms, you'll have usage questions, you'll have fill in the blanks. Okay. So all kinds of questions, the 10, 12 questions of vocab, please go through them quickly, finish them off, and then comfortably settle down to do the logical reasoning or the critical reasoning questions. Okay. That is where you need to focus on. In terms of preparation, again, critical reasoning is the area which is important for you. In the section ARDM, DM is the important one. Last year we did not have AR, but if you go to the questions before that, till 2011, you will find AR was by and large arrangement questions and not very difficult. They were obviously more difficult than what you would get in most of the other papers, but they were not very, very difficult. QADI, exactly same as CAT. Your focus has to be number system, arithmetic, time involved, time speed distance, percentage SICI, profit loss discount, data interpretation, and geometry mensuration. Okay. So these are the areas which are the most important area as far as quant is concerned. Okay. I hope that takes care of the how to attempt the paper. Sequencing of the three sections, your choice, completely your choice. You could start from your strongest section or the weakest section. My only request is don't leave your weakest for the end. So you start with a strong section. Okay. Or rather, let me say, your last section definitely has to be a strong section. Something which you are not very uncomfortable with. Okay. So if that is quant or it's analytical reasoning or VLI, entirely your choice. My suggestion is you start with a strong section. You have the sandwich in the middle, which is your weak section in the middle, and again end with your strong section. The last section is important to be a strong section because by the time you read the third section, you are a bit tired, fatigue has caught on with you, and possibly if that is not the section which you enjoy doing, you are going to do miserably in that. Okay. Couple of other things, you can wear a watch in this paper. So as we had discussed earlier, couple of questions, not that you can expect too many questions from clocks, etc., but usage of watch is possible out here. SQC can be applied here in not too many questions, but you can assume out of the 25 questions of quant, maybe 3 to 5 questions you will be able to apply. Okay. Anything else? Abhishek, do you think we need to add anything more to it?
I would just, when you're done with this, GP, I would just want Indradeep to speak a bit about the English section. She has done a research on the last 2 years' papers, so probably she'll be able to share some of her inputs with the students.
Okay, great. So later, I'll just pass on the mic to Indradeep. Over to you, and I'm giving you the speaking rights. You already have the speaking rights, so you could start speaking. You need to unmute your mic.
Hi, everybody. Am I audible?
Yeah, Indradeep, you are please continue.
Okay. So, as I think GP has almost covered a major part on how to attempt the paper, I'd quickly run through what specifically one needs to do with decision making and RCs and stuff. Okay. So, one of the most important things that you should keep in mind is maintaining the balance between speed and accuracy. As Abhishek has rightly pointed out, you need not score very high to get a good percentile. So it is very important to ensure that you get your questions correct, even if that means not attempting too many questions. Secondly, if you guys pick up any of the past year papers, you're bound to find 6 to 7 questions on grammar and vocab, which are again not very difficult. So here's your chance to earn some quick marks. These questions do not take much time to solve, so try attempting all of them. But again, accuracy is very important, so only mark those questions that you are sure of. Another thing that sets that apart from other papers is the stress that it places on reasoning now. So more than half of the paper contains critical reasoning based questions. Even the RCs that you'll find here in that contain questions that are similar to critical reasoning questions. So it becomes supremely important that one solves a good number of CR questions. For that, you can turn to the 3L's material. All class sheets and books should be done nicely. Test them is very important. Then if one wants to solve some even more questions, then you can look up various LSAT papers, GMAT papers, because the pattern and the level of questions there is very similar to that asked in XAT. Again, now I'll explain what is different in decision making. Decision making is one section that students are, I think, most anxious about. First and foremost, do not get scared of the section and avoid it altogether. Rather, solve the previous year's papers, get familiar with the kind of cases asked. There is talk this year around that DM cases may be based on real life case studies. So I think it will help if you keep a tab on such stuff. No hardcore business knowledge is required as such. Well, be in touch with the current happenings. Many a times questions, caselets, business scenarios that are asked are, copy of current situations. Make yourself familiar with various terms, business accounting, financial and technical jargon that you come across. Solve as many questions as you can. Then while attempting the questions, remember that decision making is a step-by-step logical process. First, read the case very, very carefully. Do not rush through. You have ample time this year round with 20 minutes more. So that you can, very judicially analyze here in these two sections. First, analyze the situation. Never choose an option that makes you compromise on ethics. Very, very important. Go through various ethical codes that you get on the net. Then choose the best option as per the conditions and constraints that are described in the case. Now, coming back to CR questions, the most important thing to do that will, I think, up your chances of attempting a question correctly is read the passage and the question stem very, very carefully. It is important to read very closely and between the lines. Sometimes I think one word changes the meaning of the entire argument. So read the passage at least twice, understand the arguments clearly, make a mental image of the argument with premises leading up to the argument. Read the question stem and understand what is asked. Go to the options and see what fills in the gap perfectly. I think elimination here comes in very handy. Look for options that do not answer what is asked and eliminate them outright. More often than not, I think if you've understood the argument properly, spotting the correct answer shouldn't be a problem there. Also, don't get bogged down if you can't answer a few questions. Remember, it's not about answering every question. And some questions are meant to be like that. Like you just have to leave them. So don't fret about them. There are still, I think, 2 months to go before we face that. So I'd suggest solving a lot of CR questions and decision-making questions. Well, that's it from my side. All the best, guys. GP.
Thank you, Indradeep. So the most important thing is don't rush through decision-making or critical reasoning. Make sure you read carefully and then come to the conclusion. In decision making, I think the most important thing, the two most important things which you need to remember is you have to become the role holder. You have to become the person who's supposed to take the decision. You have to forget who you are and what are your individual preferences. Okay? So if the question is asked or the decision has to be taken by the HR manager, you have to become that role holder and balance the individual as well as the organization interests. Okay? Second, this is, I think, one of the most important things which will help you eliminate choices. Ethics are extremely important. You cannot compromise on ethics at all, at least not in this paper. While many of you might do it otherwise, at least for the sake of this paper, do not compromise and choose choices which are not only ethical but also in line with the question which is asked. The last thing is what all should you be doing? First of all, you have to look at doing all the past XAT papers. I think you have XAT papers from 2007 to 2011. Okay. These papers, sorry, 2012, I'm sorry. 6 papers are there. They are available on the Career Launcher website. So the CL students can log on to the SIS go to e-library and download those papers and start attempting them. 2012 paper, my request is take it like a paper. Take it the way any other paper has to be taken, take it in a similar manner. While the earlier papers, you can choose to do some section. 2011 paper, do it like a section test only. So 2011 paper, these are 3 sections which you have to do separately. Don't worry about anything else. Focus of 2011 paper from your point of view has to be decision making, analytical reasoning, not quantitative ability. Quantitative ability paper was perfected in 2011, so QA can be ignored in this paper. Okay? But in 2011 paper, focus on verbal ability, logical reasoning, analytical reasoning, decision making. You could start that process from 2007 or 2008 paper and progressively keep doing one paper at a time. Okay? 2012, as I said, you should take it just the way an actual paper is taken. In addition to this, you will have mock XAT which will be conducted. The date will be available at your, and then you have XAT FLTs available to you. Make sure you do that entire study material. So these 6 or 7, something like 10 papers are there. Make sure you do these 10 papers thoroughly. Each and every question you should be thorough with. The only paper which you can afford to ignore, at least part of it which you can afford to ignore, is 2011 QADI can be left out. But verbal ability, logical reasoning, decision making are still important from 2011 paper also. Okay. Abhishek, anything you'd like to add?
I just thought I'll share the date. Mock XAT is supposed to be conducted on the 23rd of this month. So 23rd is a Sunday. So I guess that suits all of you. So just make sure that you take this paper. We are already in the process of sending it to print. So it'll have all the latest that we know about the paper incorporated in it. So I guess it'll be very close to the actual paper that way. So I think this is about it. GP, I think.
Abhishek, how many XAT FLTs are available?
2 FLTs and 1 mock test for that.
Okay, great. Thanks. So that makes it 3 of these and 6 these. So there are 9 papers which are available to you. Make sure you do these 9 papers thoroughly. Okay. Let me quickly run through the question and see if any question needs to be answered. Okay. And for those of you who are keen on the cutoff, I've opened that slide so that you can just copy any of the numbers, or if you can want to note down any of the numbers. Okay. Are SA and GK marks used by XLRI or they are used by other colleges as well? Till now, SA marks were used only by XLRI. XIM would occasionally use it, Go Institute of Management hardly ever. But you need to make sure that you look at all 3 of them. Okay. So SA, assume they are by and large going to be used by XLRI. GK marks might be used by some of the other institutes as well. The allied institutes, apart from the XLRI related institute, which is the XLRI, Go Institute, XIM Bhubaneswar, XIM ME, they are unlikely to be using the GK marks, but the other institutes are likely to be.
In fact, SP Jain this year has specifically asked for GK marks, and that is probably one of the stronger reasons why XAT introduced a part of it. So I read it somewhere that SPJIMR has specifically asked the XAT authorities for a smaller GK section, a very small GK section, so that they can evaluate it while calling the students probably. I don't know how it's going to be used, but SP Jain definitely is going to use the second section in some way or the other.
Yeah, and second thing is, what about XIMB and Go Institute of Management cutoffs? They will be lesser than XLRI in any case. So I would say don't worry about those cutoffs. Right now, your target has to be that you have to attempt 50% in each section, 50% attempts, and at least a target score of 35%. You will clear every cutoff. And believe me, getting these scores are not difficult. People don't get these scores because they go all over the place and look at attempting everything. Choose your questions carefully. Remember, you need to attempt only half the paper in 140 minutes, not 100 questions in 140 minutes. Okay. Okay. We will be having a separate session for essay. That specific session we will be doing only after 16 December because many students are taking SNAP also. But those of you who are not taking SNAP, please start working on the other things. We have not planned a critical reasoning seminar, but we'll see if we need to do one for critical reasoning and decision making as well. Okay. Okay, let me just quickly. XLRI does not consider academic profiles typically for sending the cutoff, sending the interview call. Funda books, no, don't solve Funda books. Just focus on MCQs. what you did in the last snap of CAT is what you need to do all over again. So there would still be CAT questions you would not have solved, or the CAT, mock CATs, or the proctored or unproctored you may not have taken. Just go through all of them.
Okay, somebody's asking about the mock XAT. Would essay and GK be there? Yes, we have an essay there, and 30 questions of GK would be there in the mock XAT, and they'll be very close to what you can expect on the D-Day. Fine. So just make sure that you check out on the second part of the mock XAT, which is an essay and 30 questions of GK. You will not be required to submit that part to the invigilator. Fine. But that is for your own reference. Just make sure you go through them. They would be very similar to, according to what we have got from the XAT authorities, they will be very similar to what you can expect on the 6th of January.
There's another question that says how to register for mock XAT. Contact your closest career launcher center. You can take the mock register there for mock XAT. That is if you are not a career launcher student. If you are a career launcher student, you are already registered for that, so you need not do anything separately. For the people who are taking SNAP, any strategy till 16, forget that exists. Till 16, please focus on only SNAP. Ensure you do a great job of SNAP. 17th onward, you start doing whatever we have discussed. Okay. So for those of you who are taking that only, you have to start immediately. And those of you who are taking that also have to attend the GK session which are being conducted, keeping SNAP in mind. Okay. Should we start solving some 2007 paper? Yes, start from 2007 paper. Okay. Okay, I've already talked about these webinars. FIJ is fact inference judgment. I will say just ignore that from this point of view. Okay. Let me go to the other part, which is the Q&A. Okay, quickly starting from back. Critical reasoning, yes, test jam should be good enough. Level 2 and level 3. Level 1 is hardly there. So level 2 and level 3. Test series students are all only CAT. Yes, you can enroll for mock XAT also. Please contact the center where you enrolled. DI calculations are not difficult in that. So don't worry about the DI part. DI calculations are easy. Okay. When you do the past papers, especially the last 3 or 4 years papers, you realize that DI calculations are not something you need to be very worried about as far as this paper is concerned. XIM, Bhubaneswar, XIME, XIS, they don't look for academic profiles. At least they are not. At least I am not aware of such academic profile. By and large, it has been the XAT score only, which is important. Okay. Now, okay. Those of you who want to quite a large number of questions on SNAP. The session which we conducted yesterday will be uploaded most probably by tomorrow evening, or definitely after tomorrow morning. So the SNAP, if you want any more inputs on that, please make sure you go through that video. It should be available in careerlauncher.com/classapart, most probably by tomorrow evening. Neha, how is SNAP different from XAT? Neha, XAT is much more reasoning oriented. XAT is much more reasoning oriented, and SNAP is very, very operation, or like we say, formula oriented paper. It is closer to CMAT or a MAT kind of a paper. So the approach changes completely. Okay. Analytical maths or formula-based maths for that. It is analytical maths for that. There will be a few questions which are formula-based, but by and large it is less of formula-based and more of analytical maths. Decision making, there is no book available. We'll go through the questions which are there in the paper itself. Yeah, Rahul. Earlier it was not planned, but let's see if we can do a seminar or a webinar on decision making and critical reasoning also. We'll be having a separate session on essay in any case. Okay, any specific question? I think we have covered practically all the questions. Okay, let me just quickly go through the remaining also.
Okay, somebody is asking about the cutoff marks for essay. There are no cutoff marks for essay. Essay is generally it comes into play only when you are being interviewed. So at times they read your essay and ask you questions from it. So I've heard about this happening in XLRI. So it might be used similarly in SPJAN as well. Otherwise, not many B schools use the essay. and they don't give you marks as such on the essay. So probably just it'll just contribute to your marks that you score in the interview. So no such marking scheme available for the essay writing task.
Okay, Nikita is asking, is it better to read the question first and then the passage? Yes, for reading comprehension you can afford to do it, but not from decision-making point of view. Decision-making, please read it completely and then move on to the question. Understand the paragraph or the passage completely and then move on. Okay, okay, Twinkle, let me have this checked up. The management campus easy updation on the essay. Most probably I'll get it done in the coming few days. Okay. Okay. Now we are having only repetition of questions. Yeah, Abhishek, you want to add something?
Yeah, somebody is asking about the SPJAN cutoff of that. SPJAN has always been, for the last few years, been giving profile-based calls. So it's never the score like in XLRI, which enables you to. SPJAN, it's always profile-based calls. So at times, and not at times, in fact, they invariably give you calls even when the scores are not available. So that's purely profile-based. So SPJAN would reject candidates with a 99.5, would call candidates with a 90. So that way it's slightly unpredictable. But if you've got a decent profile, then expect a call from SPJAN. This year, what they have done is that they have put an eligibility limit, eligibility criteria in terms of CAT and DAT scores. So what they say is that if your sectional percentiles is 70, so if in each of the sections of the test, which is 2 in case of CAT and 3 in case of that, if you score a 70% in all the sections plus an 85% overall, you are eligible. So they're just saying that you are eligible. It does not mean that you have cleared the cutoffs. So 70, 70, 70 in that, in the 3 sections that, and 85 overall makes you eligible. Plus, if your profile is good, probably you'll end up getting a call from SPJAN.
There's one question which is there from Karthik. It is about decision making. I'll read out the question. For option between do not go on leave and I will get back after asking my senior, which one should be preferred? The two options are, there's a situation, and the two options are I will not give you leave or do not go on leave, and the second option is I will get back to you after asking my senior. Which should be preferred? The second is not an option at all. You have to take the decision. You cannot pass the buck. So please remember, in decision making, you have to take a decision. You cannot say, I will get back to you after checking with my senior, or I'll look at something else. No, take a decision. And that is what the section is all about. Okay? So in fact, that is one of the rules which you have to use. If the decision is being passed on to someone else, then that is not the right decision in any case. Okay? Okay, I have been going through the questions which are remaining. I find most of them are repetitions only. So I think we'll close the session here, unless Abhishek or anyone else has anything more to add.
Okay, would just want to answer a query from a student who says that why have we started the PDP sessions when some of the exams are left? Look, the reason is very simple. All the people have different priorities in terms of exams. So there might be some people who said just that CAT was the exam for me. So all such people who have done well in CAT would want to start preparing. Also, we have batches starting at regular intervals for PDP. So it's not if you have already missed the starting date of a batch, you cannot start now. But I would still suggest in any way to start early. PDP is not a program in which you can just enroll on the 2nd of the month and go for an interview on the 9th of the month. So no, there is something. It's a process which takes some time, and so. For this kind of grooming, you'll have to give yourself some time to work on the tips and tricks that you're told by your trainers. So that way, if you can afford to do it, I'll still advise you to enroll early. Start as early as possible for this PDP. This is always going to be good for you.
Okay, yeah, just adding to what Abhishek said, please remember that your interview calls are likely, the IFT interview calls are likely to come by the end of this month, and interviews are likely to happen in January, around 20th January or so. And those of you who are hopeful of getting a score of around 45 or more, or 44, 45 or above, have a very good chance of getting a call. And if you start preparing for the interviews or the personality assessment part only after getting a call, you actually don't have too much time. Secondly, personality development is a longer term process, and a bit of input on a regular basis is better than just cramming in the information and then trying to work my way through. Okay? So that is the reason. So I would in fact go ahead and say anyone out of you who is hopeful of getting at least a 90 marks in the written test of XAT, has a raw score of at least 90 or even 85, should start preparing immediately if you have not started doing so. Those of you who are hopeful of getting at least a 44, 45 in IFT should also start preparing immediately. Don't wait for the call, start preparing, because effectively what you need to invest is only about 4 to 6 hours every week, and that will not interfere with your schedule of either papers or your work or your college. Okay, I think we'll wind up here since there are no further questions which need to be answered. Thank you very much for attending the session, and hope to meet you soon for the other sessions. Thank you very much.